Vikings training camp preview stuff, and all your other questions here on Twitter Tuesday. It is the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. Today on the show is Twitter Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions. If you ever have any questions, you can send them to me at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter, whenever it is. It doesn't have to be on Monday, but that's usually when I put the call out. You can also send an email to lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com or fill out the Google form in the show notes if you have something a little longer. So diving right in, today's first comes from Bradley Norm, who asks, in order to not start another Jake Browning-like hype train this year, what is the proper amount of hype we should have for a player who has a good practice in training camp? When are we allowed to be very hyped? Okay, so here's my rule of thumb for all of this. This is going to be, there's a whole bunch of camp questions here. So the first part of this is going to kind of be like a training camp preview mailbag. And I think the most pressing thing is to prime yourself to not go insane. All right. I've seen people get way too built up over people who had hype trains and then went, oh, well, woe is us as Vikings fans. Everything we get excited about is nothing. It's like, well, yeah, because you got excited about a CFL dude that didn't. Like, you got excited about Terrell Sinkfield. That's on you. So first things first, camp highlights are just fun. That's all they ever need to be. You don't need to try to extrapolate what they mean for the grander picture of the Vikings or who will make the roster. And oh my goodness, that guy's wide receiver 3 now or something. You don't need to extrapolate any of that out because you don't need to predict that. Unless you're like literally trying to make predictions. Then go ahead, have fun, do your 53-man thing. But in terms of just like experiencing camp, the highlights can just be cool. Oh man, whoa, KJ Osborne made a super sick catch. That rocks. And then that's it. Like, that doesn't need to mean that rocks. And also he's going to get 800 yards this year. No. Don't take it there. All right? That's my advice to you for avoiding training camp hype trains. The Jake Browning thing, if you remember, was completely insane. That was the most bonkers thing I've ever seen. Because, so if you remember, all the quarterbacks got COVID except for Jake Browning. He's the only vaccinated one, so he was the only one that didn't need to miss time for the exposure to COVID that happened in the QB room. So he heroed out the whole practice. He threw a whole bunch of passes, which is a cool feat of endurance. And he was okay in the night practice, and that was the one that you could see online. That was the one that a lot of people went to. So a lot of people kind of said, oh, he did it, and he did okay. He's the backup now. All right, cool. He's QB2, and it looked like he was going to be QB2 for a while. He had the second team reps for a really long time, and then he just fell apart, and he was really, really bad, kind of immediately after. I got to camp after the night practice, so I only saw the after ones, and I was like, what's everybody talking about? This dude stinks. He was really bad. So when he didn't make the team, I wasn't surprised about it. And if you listen to this show, you wouldn't have been surprised about it. But a lot of people were like, what? I thought he was the next QB2. Now we're stuck with this Mannion guy again? And it was kind of yeah, you are. Sorry. He was clearly the second best quarterback in the room, and it wasn't even close. And that is not praising Sean Mannion. So that's my advice. Don't try to extrapolate. Oh, cool. Jake Browning had a really cool day where he kind of heroed the team and he got to be the hero for a day on an NFL team. That kind of rocks. What that means is nothing. If you want to get excited, look for something to get excited about. It's sustained success. Think KJ Osborne last year. KJ Osborne was off of everybody's radar until minicamp last year. He was an afterthought that most people thought was going to get cut last year, and myself included. And then he was really good in OTAs in the offseason program. And I was still a little skeptical because, a lot of times somebody's good in minicamp and they just had a hot week and then it falls away. And then he just kept being good, and it was sustained. So if they can sustain it, get hype. If it's one day, then it was just fun, and that's okay, but don't let yourself get super hype. That's my training camp advice to you. Mitchell Dykstra asks, you can only watch one position group for the entirety of training camp. Which position are you choosing? Definitely O-line. Watching the O-line, so the only time I was able to be on the sidelines at training camp for this was in 2018, actually right before I got into Locked On Vikings. And the O-line was by far the most fascinating group for me to watch. Just technically, I get it, O-line, a little bit more than I get at other positions for whatever reason. It just clicks in my head and I can understand what they're doing and I can understand what they're drilling. But it's really fun to watch them work their mechanics and to work like what they work in a lot of detail and what they're working out and what they're just sort of trying to get like a basic muscle memory for. I really, really like watching the O-line. It's fascinating to me. The Nashville Norseman asks, Chris Boyd is my boy. I am admittedly biased because I got to announce his selection from the 2019 NFL Draft podium here in Nashville. That rocks. He's done great for a 7th-round pick, but I'm a bit worried. What do you think his chances are of making the team this year? So I haven't updated my 53-man prediction from what I did a couple months ago with Nick Olson. So my opinion probably is about the same. It seems like there's a group of 5 or 6 corners that's pretty locked. You know, Peterson, the 2 rookies, and then after that, Chandon Sullivan, I think, is pretty much a lock to make the team. And then after that, you kind of have a glut of guys that are like Chris Boyd, Harrison Hands, Nate Hairston, those guys, none of those guys are locks to make the team. And so I think he's kind of in that scrum and he has to get first or second place in that scrum. I think he might be the probably pole position to do that, but that's going to be what it is. If he has a terrible camp, he's getting cut. If he has a great camp, he's not. So it's like there's definitely stakes here. And it's not, if Caleb Evans has a terrible camp, he's not getting cut. He's a 4th-round pick. If Chris Boyd has a terrible camp, he's getting cut. So I would put him on the roster bubble. Peter Larson says, you said last week that the most important thing for Kevin O'Connell to accomplish is to make Cousins feel protected. That was a couple weeks ago, by the way. I did not get to this one last week, so sorry, Peter. My question is, what does a Vikings team look like when they're led by a Cousins who feels safe behind the line? Do you still think he reads the teleprompter based on what the defense gives him, or do you think we could see a different gear of Cousins that we haven't seen yet? So this is like Kevin O'Connell's quieted mind thing. I think you see less bonehead stuff, less line up under the right guard kind of stuff, which that was a funny gaffe, but sometimes similar brain fart stuff will happen in the middle of a read and it'll cause him to misread. So I think you see less of that. You see less hurrying. There have been plays where he's just very in a hurry to get through his progression, and that's because his internal clock is speeding up, and that's because of pressure, and that might even be a calculated, like, on-purpose response to pressure, and if he feels protected, he won't feel like he has to do that, and that gives the wide receivers more time to get open. I think that's, like, the tangible effect that has, and then theoretically, the wide receivers have more time to get open. Thielen can do more of his super tricksy route running stuff. If Jefferson can get deeper or whatever, theoretically, you should see some sort of production impact from that. There's a whole bunch more questions that I have to get to, but first, let me talk to you about banking. Overdraft fees suck, especially if you're real tight on cash and it's down to the dollar and you got to get a few gallons of gas in your tank or maybe get a birthday present for something or someone. You don't want to deal with those overdraft fees. That is where Dave comes in. Dave is a banking app that can get you up to $500 worth of instant cash with extra cash. There's no interest or credit check in any of that. You got to pay it back, but no interest, no credit check. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave. Think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Hey, so this Saturday is the first episode of my History of the Minnesota Vikings documentary. This is a completely independent project that I'm doing on my own. I'm releasing it jointly on Zone Coverage and a Patreon that I started. And it is something that I've been working tirelessly on for the entire 2022 calendar year. I'm super, super, super excited to bring it out to you. I will have links and everything in the show notes when all of it comes out. Be on the lookout, be on my Twitter, but you can also find it on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/LukeBraunNFL. or on zonecoverage.com. It's super, I'm like beaming with pride about it, and I'm really excited to share it with y'all, and I hope y'all go check it out. But for now, let's continue on with this mailbag. The next one comes from Mick Wetzel, who asks, Week 1 versus Green Bay. 3:20 left in the third quarter. Minnesota is up 21-17. It's 3rd and 9 from our own 48. What play do you call? Okay, A, very fun thing. I love this, and I would do an entire mailbag of only these. B, so let's break down the situation, right? I'll try to talk this out. Week 1 game, late in the third, you've got a small lead, but it's only one score, and it's 3rd and 9 from about midfield, right? So my first thing is, okay, if I get 4 or 5 yards, I'd be pretty aggressive about going for it. I don't know if Kevin O'Connell will be the same, but I would be pretty aggressive about going for it. So that's in my mind, but I just want to convert this, right? I don't want to bring up a 4th and 4. So let's try to convert it. But I do want an option that gets, 5, maybe even 6 yards, brings you to a place where you can go for it. So I'm coming out in, we'll call it 11 personnel, maybe 10 personnel, depending on if you want a receiver or an Irv Smith out there. But I'll go 11 personnel. I'll bring out Thielen, Jefferson, KJ Osborne, Irv Smith, and Dalvin Cook. I'll put Adam Thielen on the back side of the formation, whatever the field side of the formation, wherever there's more space. I'll put Adam Thielen there, and I'll have him run a blaze out. That's his golden route, which is where you kind of lean the route in a little bit, and then it's a deep out. I'll run 11 yard, maybe 10 yard at the sticks, blaze out, try to isolate him, and go get a blaze out. Justin Jefferson, I'm putting on the play side of the formation, and I want him to be the focal point of some sort of 3-level concept. I want Justin Jefferson to run a deep post of some sort, mostly because if they are in any kind of poach coverage, which would be something on 3rd down, a poach coverage is where the backside safety, so the safety that would be over there helping with Adam Thielen, would come help out on the strong side. And if I put Irv Smith and Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne over on that side, I might be able to get the safety to cheat over and bring some help, and that gives me the Adam Thielen thing. So I'm telling Kirk Cousins, I don't know what this play call would be called. I don't even know if there's anything in that play. I'm like making this up as I go. But I would tell Kirk Cousins, you're looking for cornerback leverage. If the cornerback leverage is very off, or if it is too far to the inside, then just go to Adam Thielen. If the safety cheats over, go to Adam Thielen. But if none of that happens, you can come off Adam Thielen pre-snap if you don't see the right indicators, and then go to a 3 levels concept, probably like a post, a dig, and then something underneath from Irv Smith or Osborne. And then I'll also have Dalvin Cook run a little check down swing pattern out to Adam Thielen's side. And that will help versus like feather coverages, which I don't think you'd see. But hey, if something goes wrong, Dalvin Cook in space with not many people over there. That's probably what I do. Decent chance this ends up being like a post throw up the seam to Justin Jefferson. But if they really want to sell out to take that away, then you got Adam Thielen one-on-one with the blaze out, and I'm taking that on 3rd and 9 all day. And if I have to, I can hit Irv Smith on a spot route, and that might get the 4 or 5 yards that I can, and I can go for it on the ensuing 4th down. That's my my thought process there. Josh asks, what kind of Vikes collectibles do you have? I got a Chris Carter signed football when I was 19 that I had no idea was coming and cried like a baby. Fair. Absolutely fair. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see some of it behind me. I have my Vikings gnome, which any self-respecting Minnesota Vikings Redditor from about 2016 needs to have. I have a number of books. A lot of it's my research pile for the history documentary, but I also am just really glad I have them. I have Denny Green's book. I have Bud Grant's, Joe Capps. Robert Smith's book is esoteric, and it's like totally a trip. I have my Eevee, which came from Build-A-Bear Workshop. It is wearing a little Vikings jersey, and it's very cute, and I like it a lot. But I don't have a ton of collectibles. And then I also have, it's a little bit hard to see on YouTube, and on a podcast, it's impossible to see if you're just listening. But it's a little Odin sculpture that my stepmom made, which is very special to me. So that's all cool stuff. But I'm not a huge collectibles guy. I got a bunch of jerseys. But that's mostly just because I like to wear jerseys on game days on the podcast. So I've got a cool rotation. But I'm not like a big time collectibles guy. That's really it. Smith's Stan account asks, with Kevin O'Connell at the helm and Zimmer famously saying he'd block any chance of Hard Knocks coming to Minnesota, do you think we would be more likely to allow cameras in? I would live for that season. I would super live for that season too. Probably not, though. I don't think anyone wants Hard Knocks. I'm pretty sure like conventional wisdom is it is seen as a genuine disadvantage to have cameras all up in your business during practice. Um, a lot of teams have had state secrets, I guess I would call them, leaked via Hard Knocks. Just stuff like, oh, they could tell what you were drilling all camp, or they heard a play call, and if you were doing that, in episode 1, and that was one of your day one install things, then now we know something. Those little edges have hurt teams. And so I think teams don't like it very much in general. So probably not at all. But I'm not a coach. I'm a fan and I want to watch good TV of my Vikings. So yeah, I'm in for it. Chuck asks, how would you organize NFL teams if they were aligned more like college conferences, i.e., more than two? How many conferences would you have and who would be in them? So I love how the divisions are set up. So 8 conferences with 4 teams in each. But I'm assuming that's lame. So I'd probably divide it up geographically to minimize travel and to keep rivalries together. So the geographical thing gets really hard when you talk about like the AFC West, because now you got Kansas City going to Las Vegas and to San Diego, and anywhere you draw a line on a map probably is separating those. But of all the rivalries to kill, the AFC West, like I'd rather kill that than something in the NFC North or like Ravens Steelers or like Falcons Saints, So I'd probably do like the South, the Midwest, the Northeast, and then the Northwest and the Southwest. So 5 conferences, right? That seems like decent travel. I don't know if the teams would like be even there, but also it doesn't matter because they're college conferences. Also, this would be awful. I love intra-conference. I love that there's 32 teams and they all get to know each other just like a little bit. And you always have like somewhere in 4 years, you're going to have that revenge game, It's never going to be too long. I like all that stuff, so I wouldn't do this. Few more questions left to get to, so stick with me here on Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast. Next one comes from Tad, who asks, is it meaningful that the Vikings signed Johnny Munt as soon as free agency opened? Like, does that mean they're definitely good with him being TE2 and there was never a chance of Rudolph or anyone else? So it does sound like there was a chance of Rudolph. It didn't go. They went to the Bucks for whatever reason, but it does sound like they were interested. And they actually, this is the other news, they did sign a tight end. I'm pretty sure right after you asked this, they signed a tight end named Sean Byer, who was a tight end 2 for Iowa. He was sort of buried in Iowa for a long time behind like Noah Fant and George Kittle before him, and then like TJ Hawkinson. So he didn't get a lot of run in Iowa, and then he went to Denver and didn't make the team there as an undrafted guy, and now he's coming into camp, probably a camp body. Somebody did cut up his top 15 college catches. He has 18 college catches, so you can basically go grind all the Sean Byer tape if you want, which I did, because it's like 4.5 minutes long, and it seems like it's like a lot of rollouts and checkdowns, and he's just kind of a soft spot in the zone kind of guy. Seems like whatever dude. But that did fill in the 90th spot. The other news, I guess, while I'm here, I should have mentioned this at the top of the show, was the physically unable to perform list. As all the rookies reported, everybody who's there is supposed to be there. The only guys on PUP are Blake Prohl and Ryan Connolly, both of them coming off of ACLs. Notably, no Andrew Booth. Not on PUP. That's really good news. That means that his recovery from injury stuff is going well enough that he can practice right away when he is supposed to, which he told us, and the Vikings told us that they expected that, but it's nice to see it in practice. Actions speak louder than words. Purple Haze asks, who's your most overrated player, and why is it Trevon Diggs? Ooh, I don't know. So Trevon Diggs is an interesting player, overrated or underrated, whatever. He's somebody I think you can learn something from, because Trevon Diggs has found success in doing something very, very specific and doing it as aggressively as possible and being really, really aggressive. And he has a skill set that can be tailored toward aggressively jumping routes and giving up 150 yards but getting 2 picks. And the Cowboys have essentially just taken that devil's bargain, and that's fine. And they've committed to that. And I think that there is a lesson to be learned there about draft prospects and saying, okay, who do you want this player to be? And if that, of course you want every player to be the biggest superstar ever, but if you're going to lean into a flaw and have this player just be somebody who, give them a job that they can execute and have them execute it really well, are you okay with that job? I think it can help you sort of contextualize players beyond where they rank on a big board. Um, the most overrated player is, at least in Vikings circles, it's JC Treader. He was extremely injured for most of his time in Cleveland. He never really got off the ground in the last couple of years. He's old, he's injured, and he's not getting signed. And everybody's really confused about why he hasn't been signed. Like, he's got knee issues, man. I don't know. He's getting overrated like hell around these parts, so I'll go with him. Omar asks, is Chisena's punt gunning ability worth enough to keep him as the sixth wide receiver over a higher upside guy like Naylor or Amir Smith-Marset? So I don't think that those two would be the guy. Well, maybe Naylor. But a few things here. Somebody responded to Omar and was like, Chisena's upside is huge, which, yeah, I mean, he's like got all the track speed, right? If he can learn how to run a route and learn how to track a ball, he'd be an unbelievable wide receiver, but that's like 2/3 of being a wide receiver that he has to learn. So yeah, he does have a lot of upside, but the other answer is yes. Not over Amir Smith-Marset, who is already, I think, a pretty good wide receiver four. If not, perhaps maybe he takes a step to be wide receiver three material. But we already have KJ Osborne, so we just have two wide receiver threes, which awesome, great, into that. But yeah, I don't think he would knock ISM. I think he would knock Naylor maybe. And I don't know if Naylor will be ready to be on an NFL roster in his first year. He might be a guy that has to chill on the practice squad, which is 6th-round pick. That's totally fine. But yes, being useful on special teams is absolutely the way you make the team. And if you are to use like Madden ratings, I'm keeping the 70 that is good on special teams over the 75 that isn't. It's just super worth it. By the time you're down to wide receiver 6, you don't even expect that guy to be good. But if you're going to suit up, you got to do something on the field, and that's usually going to be special teams. And I don't want that unit to suck, so I'm keeping the guys that are good on it over the guys that are not good on it, and maybe would be better if we get down to wide receiver 5. Like at that point, you're not really expecting a lot of utility. Cho asks, how much do you think the strength and weakness of a future draft class factor into the current year's draft plan? Example, next year's O-line class is weak, which seems to be true at this very early stage. So let's grab a guy to groom so we don't have to sweat it. Yeah, that very much factors in. Rick Spielman talked about it a lot, and I think that's pretty universal. I don't think that's a Spielman thing. But when you are in a scouting department, you basically have something going on for like freshmen and sophomores and stuff. Like you'll go to scout some senior there, but you're never watching that guy for the first time in like NFL scouting departments. When you go to watch an Alabama game, you're watching everybody that could possibly be drafted in Alabama over the next few years, and you're starting to get your scouting reports on them. So you will have a general idea that, oh man, next year's O-line class is really bad. Let's hit O-line now. That is absolutely a thing that happens, and if it's not happening, I think you're doing a bad job. East Coast Vikings fan asks, in 1991, yes, we got some history. The Vikings played the Phoenix Cardinals twice in a 3-week span during the regular season. This has driven me crazy for years. Why? So in 1991, the schedule had to be made different because the teams weren't as even. There were 14 teams in the NFC. You had 5 teams in a division, so half your games were divisional games, and then the rest of the 8 had to be divided up into what was like the old rotation, and it was a lot less clean and a lot more complex, and then so you'd get stuff like you're playing the same place or whatever team as last year, or your one rotational opponent from the NFC East from last year, and that was the Phoenix Cardinals, but you play them twice, and then the schedule makers can do that where they can do Cardinals, someone else Cardinals. They can do that with anybody. The Vikings have done that with the divisional opponents before too. That's why that happens. It was just a quirk of how the schedule had to be made because it was a weird, odd amount of teams, and the 32-team schedule is a lot cleaner. Swamp Sparrow asks, will the Vikings win the Super Bowl this year? Yep. Zach asks, will the Twins trade for a pitcher at the deadline? Sorry, I'm just asking everybody. Yep. Skullchester asks, if the NFL were to add some more teams to divisions, what animals slash names and cities slash states would you like to see? Okay, so I think St. Louis came out for the Rams when they were there, and I think Stan Kroenke did them dirty. So I think St. Louis could get a team. You could probably do San Antonio. You probably couldn't put too many teams in Texas. A third Texas team would feel kind of weird, though. I think Alabama would do it. I do think Birmingham would show up. as long as you're not competing with college football, I think there's room for more than just the Falcons and Saints in the South. So those are the ones that come immediately to mind, or Oakland too, like teams that have kind of unfairly, or places that have unfairly lost a city. San Diego, not as much, because part of what made the Chargers move was like attendance and kind of fan base issues, and like kind of fan participation issues, I guess maybe is more the case. Like the financials of that were part of it. But otherwise, I would go probably toward like Oakland and St. Louis. And then I like the idea of an Alabama team. In terms of what animals and names, it would have to be something like native to that place. And I don't know enough about those places, but I prefer teams like the Utah Jazz bug the hell out of me. To change the name. Lakers, you too. All right, change the name. You are no longer in New Orleans and Minneapolis, respectively. Like if the Packers ever moved, they wouldn't. But if they ever moved, you would like they have to. They couldn't become the Houston Packers. Like it would have to be something local, something with heritage, and something with like where that place is from. I love Minnesota Vikings, it's Scandinavian and its roots and its culture and stuff, and that's like super awesome. But for me, the most important consideration with like a potential expansion team thing is giving a football team back to a fan base that, like, if the NBA expands and doesn't go to Seattle, we riot, right? That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. Tomorrow on the show, I have no earthly idea. We'll do something fun, though. I've got a couple of history things. There probably will start to be news to cover and stuff. We're going to be more into camp. It's going to be a little bit less like filler content, which is fun. Welcome to the 2022 season. We're here. Welcome to people who have maybe checked out all summer. Welcome back. I love you. Come maybe go check out some of the old summer ones you missed. You might like some of that history stuff, or some of the other like evergreen topics that we talked about. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.